Okay, so you're listening to You Can Fix That in Post with Elise, Dave, and Simon. And just a little bit of housekeeping. We missed 127 hours last week when we were talking about our one-location films.
How on earth did we do that?
Well, I think it's because it's an unremarkable film. It's one of those things. It got nominated for Best Picture in a very slow year with lots of nominations. But the reason why it got nominated was because it had James Franco in it and because it was directed by Danny Boyle. But the reality is, it's not that much better than Buried. And Buried was one of those losers where we went, one location does not work.
It's really hard, I think, for a single actor to carry a film when they have nothing to bounce off. Like, they're talking to themselves or they're recording themselves. It's really tricky to make a compelling film out of that.
Well, yeah, when you look at the successful one-location things, it's an ensemble cast.
Exactly.
You look at Devil, okay, it's in an elevator, but yeah, there's like 6 to 8 people in there. So if you can't change the location, you better change the dynamic. It's the same with Cube. You've got like 6 to 8 people all trying to survive in this cube. Well, if there was one person in the cube, that ain't going to make a feature.
You need a few distinct and different personalities bouncing off each other to make it interesting.
Distinct and different personalities. That's this show in a nutshell. Okay, so that was Elisa's week to have her topic. My topic is going to be something that is a bit polarizing. It's vampires.
Everybody loves vampires.
Well, I don't necessarily believe that. I mean, I think over time, lots of different directors have done vampire movies, lots of different actors have done vampire movies, and the mythology has changed with the time. Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to say right now is, Dave, what's a vampire rule? What's a vampire mythology?
Well, there's one myth that they don't like garlic.
They don't like garlic, yes. And it's not the same for every movie, but garlic is one thing.
Definitely not, yeah.
Okay, Elise, what do you know about vampires?
Well, one of the classics, they don't go out in sunlight.
They don't go out in sunlight. Now, if you're going to Bram Stoker's Dracula, it's that they're less powerful in sunlight, but they don't die. If you look at Nosferatu, which is the first instance of sunlight killing the vampire, now you also have that Twilight thing where it's like, we sparkly diamond things. Oh, we don't die, we just glitter like emos. I don't know. My myths are, you've got what? Stake through the heart, the cutting off of the head, you've got holy water, you've got the crucifix, you've got silver, but that's more of a modern thing. That happened probably in the 90s. Blade was one of those things that pioneered the idea of silver.
Yeah, silver and garlic.
And silver traditionally was, werewolf territory.
It was, yeah. That's where it all gets a bit hazy. Like, things have bled into each other, pardon the pun, and crossed over.
Well, case in point, Underworld.
Yeah, absolutely. There's literal crossing over crossbreeds there.
Yeah. Now, the thing with silver was that there isn't a huge amount of explanation for it. It's in Blade, it's in True Blood. The one film that I like, even though it was pretty crap, in terms of mythology, is Dracula 2000. Because that proposes the idea that Dracula was actually Judas, and that he was committing suicide, the noose broke, and because of that he was doomed to walk the earth. He was allergic to silver because Judas took 30 pieces of silver to daub in Jesus. Likewise, he doesn't like crucifixes because him betraying Jesus put him on the cross, which I thought was an interesting take on the vampire mythology, even though the film is pretty crap. Now,
it's good that people can have that room to do anything they want with it, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing about vampires. They have evolved so much over time, even over the last 20 years in film.
Yeah, and
have changed massively.
The different mythologies and the different rules are there. Like, for example, in Bram Stoker's Dracula, Dracula turns other people into vampires. In Nosferatu, which is based on Bram Stoker's Dracula, he doesn't turn anyone else into vampires. In Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire, directed by Neil Jordan, you turn into a vampire by being drained, and then you're suckling on the blood of the vampire.
Same as the vampires in Buffy as well.
Yes.
You're drained, you drink their blood, you change.
But if you look at Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark and other vampire films whereby it's seen as a virus, You basically get bitten and the virus turns you into a vampire. You don't need to drain their blood or anything like that. It's just if you survive being drained, you're going to be a vampire.
Yeah, that's a common one as well in several vampire stories and TV shows as well.
Now, there are other bits of mythology. For example, you are rendered powerless if you invite a vampire inside the house. So, for example, in the Lost Boys classic 80s, they invite this guy into their house, and then they test him with holy water and garlic, and it doesn't hurt him. But he is the head vampire, so they've just been rendered powerless. While in other ones, they can't physically go into the location without being invited. If you look at Buffy, you look at Angel and Spike and all those people, they're basically stuck at the door because they can't come in. It's like a physical barrier.
Yeah.
While with Lost Boys, it's like, yep, you can come in, but we can kill you, or you can come in and you're invited and we can't kill you. What other mythologies do we have? We have the idea, actually, that they are insanely counting of things. So if you throw salt over your shoulder, the vampire can't chase you down and get you until it's counted every grain of salt.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, and it's not being used widely, but I think it should be. You've got the idea...
Vampires with Asperger's or something like that.
Yeah, pretty much. You've got the seductive kind of glamoring power. It's this idea of sexy vampires that are like, have that Jedi of, you will suck my penis. You know,
Well, that one came directly from Bram Stoker's.
Yes.
Where Dracula would seduce young women to suck their blood and make them his slaves. And put humans under his thrall to do his bidding.
Yeah. And specifically with Dracula, you've got those things. You've got, he can turn into a bat, he can turn into a mist, he can turn into a wolf. You have other things of controlling animals. You've got an ability to change the age that he appears. And with that particular thing, it was, if he drained you, your corpse would come back from the dead as a vampire. It wasn't about they had to drink any of his blood or any of that stuff.
No. Which makes it interesting as to where these things have come from. Like, they must have come from other writers or
historical facts.
Historical stories. Like, the Bram Stoker was apparently influenced and inspired by the spread of tuberculosis throughout America and the way that it would affect people that became ill, that would literally waste away, become, upset by sunlight, and this myth that spread that people were coming back from the dead and sucking the life out of other people to pass on the disease.
I mean, there's also the idea of Stoker got the idea of Dracula specifically from Vlad the Impaler, who was a Romanian kind of warmonger who impaled people. His
Sounds
enemies.
Like a fun guy.
Yeah.
Great at parties.
I mean, it's one of those things. It's one thing removed from Pauline Hanson. Don't come to our country or we'll impale you, and you'll put the impaled bodies on the border. It's just like, settle down, Pauline. But yeah, so he impaled people, and there were acts of cannibalism and all those kinds of things. There was also a Elizabeth Bathory or Bathory or whatever it was. Bathory, who bathed in virgin blood and apparently was responsible for hundreds of deaths. So this idea of gaining immortality by taking the life force of another has been around for quite some time.
And linking it to blood, yeah.
So, in saying all this, the history of the vampire film was Nosferatu is the first instance, and that's based off Bram Stoker's Dracula, the novel, and they didn't get permission for that, so they got sued, and all the copies of the film got destroyed, and I don't believe they made any money from that.
Which is a shame, because it started a whole revolution, really, of monster films.
And the thing of that is that the versions of that film that you see now are cobbled together by different sources, because in reality all of them should have been destroyed. It's now royalty free, so you can access that anywhere online, you can edit it, you can do whatever you want because the copyright's lapsed. Now, then you have those kind of 30s horror stuff. You've got Bela Lugosi and you've got Frankenstein and Boris Karloff and the Wolfman. And then after that, you've got the British Hammer horror where Christopher Lee was, Dracula. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the 80s where it's just like you've got Lost Boys and you've got Fright Night, and then you've got Near Dark where vampires are a little bit more aware of their kind of cliche and it's more fun. It's horrific, but it's also more fun. Mm-hmm. And then in the 90s, you've got Buffy and the brooding Interview with a Vampire where it's like, oh, we've got to live forever and I'm in love with you.
And Rice's novels.
Yeah.
Making them sexy.
Yes. Very sexy. And then, of course, that got manipulated recently into things like Twilight and True Blood, where it's more soap opera than it is horror. In response to those kinds of lovey-dovey stuff, you've got brutal vampire films like 30 Days of Night or John Carpenter's Vampires, or you could even argue things like I Am Legend have vampire kind of connotations, or Priest, where it's just like, yep, these are horrific things. Let's not try and make it into Pride and Prejudice. So that's basically the cinematic history of vampires, and there's a load more films out there that have spanned so many different genres.
Even comedy.
Yeah, like Vampire in Brooklyn's funny. Mm-hmm. Vampire Suck is, trying to be funny.
What We Do in the Shadows.
Yes. And there is also kind of historic vampire films like Shadow of a Vampire, where it's actually taking a fictitious circumstance of the making of Nosferatu and saying, well, no, the actor that was actually playing Count Orlok and the Dracula ripoff was actually a vampire on set killing people. And that's got a great cast. So what I'm going to say now is, let's wrap this section up. And I wonder if Dave can cut around that.
It's alright, we can fix that in post.
Yeah, you can fix that in post.
So before 2 days ago, I didn't actually know what a vampire movie was. I didn't think of Blade as a vampire movie.
What did you think of it as? Like a guy in leather that was...
An action movie with a guy in leather, pretty much. But with vampires. I thought more of a vampire movie more as, Count Dracula. And yeah, I actually, when you first said a vampire movie, I thought, oh, Wonderland. That's...
Wonderland?
Is it Wonderland, the zombie movie with Bill Murray?
Zombieland,
yes.
Yeah.
And
zombies, vampires.
Yeah, and it took me a while to realize that zombies are not actually vampires.
Wow. When you're saying you're thinking about the Dracula stuff, I mean, we haven't even talked about the fact that the Count on Sesame Street is a vampire.
Right, true. This is true.
That's where this counting thing comes
is that
from.
Where it counts?
Yeah.
No,
Count Dracula.
I never put two and two together. So...
Well, bless you, Dave.
Thank you.
You've grown.
So I watched Nosferatu for the first time just very recently, and it was kind of cool. And then watching Shadow of Vampire, I really liked, which was based on Nosferatu, and it was kind of very meta.
Who's in it?
Willem Dafoe, and he plays the Count, which of course is Dracula, but they're not allowed to call him Dracula. And I didn't actually recognize him at all because obviously the makeup was really good.
And it was nominated for best makeup by the Academy Awards.
Right.
Yeah.
That would make sense. And I liked, they just kept having, I guess, A-grade actors come on, when they had, what's that guy's name? Carrie something?
Carrie Elwes.
Yes.
From Saw. Let's just call this the Carrie Elwes show.
Carrie Elwes.
Next week it'll be let's talk about Princess Bride.
Oh, I could talk about Princess Bride, man.
Yeah.
There's no vampires in it, though.
You got John Malkovich in that thing.
Yes.
You've got Eddie Izzard.
Yeah. I haven't seen many movies with Eddie, actually.
He always plays bit parts. It's always like Mystery Man or The Cat's Meow or Hannibal. Yeah, I gotta say my favourite vampire film, and I can watch it regularly, and every couple of years I go back to it, is Interview with a Vampire. And it's one of those things whereby it had different takes on the mythology. You have this idea of immortality. Like, usually we're talking about the horror and how do they feed and how do we kill them and all that stuff. Very few films talk about the idea of, crap, these people are like 300 or 400 years old.
It puts the vampire in the role of the protagonist as well. It's not just they're not just the antagonist.
It's all about them. It's their story and how they interact with each other and what rules they have within their societies. Like the idea of you can't turn someone who's so young because then they're going to be a child forever, and how does that work? Also, the idea of you don't have to drink human blood. You can live off the blood of animals. Well, Brad Pitt, Louis, is basically a vegetarian of sorts, even though he's eating animals, but he's eating the animal vegetarian equivalent for vampires. So he drinks the blood of rats and poodles and stuff like that because he will not take a human life. But you also have this film that was directed by Neil Jordan, who had done The Crying Game, and you had Stan Winston, who is like a master of special effects, doing these special effects, knowing that they're so subtle that he won't get nominated for an Oscar, even though he's the guy who made the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. He's the guy that made the Terminator. He's the guy who did the Predator. Basically, anytime you've looked at a Steven Spielberg film and gone, is that a puppet alien thing? It's Stan Winston who's created it. Now, there are moments in Interview with a Vampire whereby everything's so subtle that you can't tell it's a visual effect. Like, they cut Tom Cruise's throat and the life literally drains out of him and he turns into, like, this skeletal corpse. And that was all puppetry. And
it's creepy as well. And it's well put together because it scares the life out of you.
And you could kind of go, oh, these days we just do all that with CG. Well, they had to make this kind of puppet and they had to drain the life out of it. And it looks exactly like him, but it's not him. And
Antonio Banderas going crazy with the scythe, and was it Antonio?
No, that was Brad Pitt. And Brad Pitt was going crazy with the scythe against Antonio Banderas' acting troupe because they had killed Claudia.
Right.
And the whole thing with that is that Claudia had killed, in theory, Tom Cruise, so they had sentenced her to death. The best special effects is they put her and her new mother in this kind of dome where the sunlight turns them to ashes. And Stan Winston made this statue from ashes that would have wires through it so that if you touched it a certain way, it would dissolve into air and dust. And these days you just go, oh, it's all CGI. This person's turned to dust and that's it. But no, that was him creating this statue that would turn into dust with one take.
That's amazing.
Like, you look at Buffy and it's like you've stabbed them and they've gone onto fire and they've turned into dust. You just take that for granted.
Yeah.
But you look at the quality of that statue and you go, one take, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Doesn't get nominated for crap.
It's risky as well, because if it goes wrong...
Yeah, someone's having a coffee and they nudge it. Oh, shit. Do we have another one?
Stan's having a breakdown on the floor.
Yeah. So that's my favourite. And, of course, it's one of those things whereby it's tarnished because some people made this other film called Queen of the Damned in Australia, and I can never unwatch that, and it was pure shit sandwich.
Yeah, I don't think Anne Rice was a big fan either.
No, and the fortunate thing is that Anne and her son and Brian Fuller, who did Hannibal and Pushing Daisies and Dead Like Me, they're now doing the Vampire Chronicles. That's going to be a TV show, so it'll actually be really good because instead of being confined to 2 hours, you're going to have lots and lots of time to develop.
Because those books are epic.
Yes, and there's a lot
of material there to work with.
Okay, so what about you? What's the vampire thing that has impacted you the most?
Without a doubt, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Now, we're talking about the TV show, not the Luke Perry, Donald Sutherland, Rutger Hauer.
Hey, look. Everything comes from something. Joss Whedon was
some money.
Really, really done over on that one. I think it was taken out of his hands, and unfortunately, that unfortunate film happened. But he rose from the ashes like a phoenix and created an entire world in the late 90s that has gone on to literally become the Whedonverse, and it just blew the minds of everyone that saw it back in, I think it was 97 when it premiered, and they got 7 seasons out of that, and they turned the whole blonde girl running away on its ear and gave us a hero in Buffy.
Well, here's the thing. Joss Whedon, I have a love-hate relationship with. I love the things he creates. I hate the fact that he never seems to have enough power to keep them going. So
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes things like Fox come along and really kick you right in the balls.
yeah. And it's one of those things whereby when you look at Buffy the film, he didn't have the power creatively to make it. So other people made it with his script, basically.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I don't mind that film. There are worse films out there. I like Donald Sutherland. I like Rutger Hauer. And, you know, you got these little cameos by like Hilary Swank and Ben Affleck, and you got David Arquette in there when he's young. It's a bit of fun. And there's this particular death scene by the guy who's like Pee Wee Herman where he gets stabbed in the heart. And then he starts knocking over stuff. And yeah.
I think the outtake from that goes for about like 5 minutes of just him writhing on the floor.
Yeah. And
the principal in that is so good when he comes along at the end of the film and all these like dead vampires all over the floor. Detention! 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 It's great.
Yeah. And, you know, it did spawn the TV show to some extent. Like,
who would have thought that a TV show that would run for 7 years, spawn a sequel, would come from a crappy 90s vampire movie. Like, you would not have put money on that horse at all. And yet, it was a juggernaut.
I think part of that comes down to Sarah Michelle Gellar was attractive, or is attractive. They cast attractive people. This sounds really superficial. But then they also back it up with a decent actor in people like Giles and was it Anthony Stewart Head.
Yeah.
So
they're all good in their way.
They're all good in their way.
They know their characters.
Yeah.
And the episodes are well directed. It built a world really quickly and efficiently. And it built a language. Like there was the whole Buffy speak thing that came from that. I
would still maintain that oh my god, what's his David Boreanaz in like the first season. You know, you could
Let's not talk about David's like Irish accent at all. Let's not even bring that up.
Oh, it's terrible.
Horrendous.
It's like, what's his name? His name is I'm Richard Gere. You don't hunt the jackal hunts you. And you're like, wow.
It's not even that good. Like you've just outdone it right now. It's terrible. But
yeah.
But I think Joss knew exactly what he wanted from his actors, and he wanted Angel to be the dark, mysterious, brooding guy.
I'm in the shadows and I'm sexy.
Which he wasn't afraid to parody as well. They weren't afraid to have a bit of fun with it.
And comment on the fact that he was playing that role in the dark. Yeah.
And have other characters in the show say, oh, he's just sitting in the corner brooding, like in his dark jacket. Like
the other thing was, Joss had written Alien Resurrection, and you go by the idea of that, it's about a strong female lead who is kicking the crap out of people. Same with Buffy. I mean, quite frequently Joss makes these films and TV shows where the females are empowered.
Absolutely.
Like, when you look at someone like Inara in Firefly, she don't take no shit.
No. Same with River in Firefly. She's the superpowered teenage girl. And that was new and different for the late 90s. It was something that teenage girls really were drawn to, and that wasn't just, and they'd built an audience around that because, you know, they were talking about it, and then they were bringing their friends in and their families, and it was a show that spoke directly to teenagers about teenage issues, but not in a preachy way. In any, like, no preachiness at all. It spoke to them on their level. And likewise, there have been some shows which I'm going to say don't necessarily do that have followed since. Like, I've seen a couple episodes, but The Vampire Diaries, I feel like at least maybe the first season or whatever, what I did see, it was very much a superficial kind of gossipy kind of, it didn't have any kind of gravitas to it. It was very flighty and nothing. And maybe in time that's gotten bigger and the storylines have gotten bigger and the writing's gotten better. I don't know. It's much more from the Anne Rice school of vampires and the whole sexy, brooding, tortured souls
Yeah.
school of thought, rather than the I'm going to kill you and I'm going to have fun doing it school of thought, which is where Buffy's vampires largely came from.
And the happy medium between the two would probably be True Blood. I mean, True Blood is quite graphic and bloody, but at the same time, there's only so many times when Anna Paquin go, oh, Bill, I love you, Bill, but then I like Eric Knowles, man. You know.
Not your mama's vampire show.
Yeah.
Boobs out, yep.
Yeah, lots of boobs in that one. Well, it's HBO, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah. And yeah, to really push the envelope with the gore and the violence.
And also the mythology, the idea of werewolves, fairies, witches, and everything kind of...
Yeah, pagan gods.
Yeah.
Bit of everything. It was really everything in the kitchen sink with that show.
And you got to say that Buffy probably in some ways paved the way for that kind of...
Well, yeah, the first season at the very least was definitely Monster of the Week, and then it went into the larger storyline as the seasons went on. Season 2, I don't think will be topped.
That's the Master, isn't it?
No, season 1 was the Master. Season 2 was Spike and Drusilla. An angel turning evil.
My problem with the whole Spike and Drusilla thing is that they always had to justify their history with Angel. So every now and then at the start of an episode, they'd go back in time and be like, 1763. Oh, Spike. Oh, do you have any potatoes with that blood? I love some potatoes. And then it'd be like, everyone thought that was horrific and terrible. Should we have another one next season?
It came and went as well. That was... That's where it all fell apart. Anytime they had to get David Boreanaz to do any quote-unquote acting.
Yeah.
Just sit in the corner and look pretty, David. You're fine.
Yeah, we'll cut around you being pretty.
Yeah, just put on the coat and make it look epic.
Okay, so what do you think about this? What are your favourite vampire films? What are the films that aren't necessarily vampire films but have elements of that? I mean, you look at something like Preacher, that's not a vampire TV show, but there's a vampire in it. So join the conversation on Facebook.
Come and say hi. Yell at us.
Yell at Elise, not me. Or be an old person and be typing in caps and not know you're yelling.
True. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. This has been a really fun one. I think we've got some good chat out of this topic. It is Dave's turn to pick the theme for our next episode.
Be very afraid.
I am, dude. I'm scared.
What have we done?
What have we done? It could turn quite bad, and I may have to rewatch films that I've buried deep within my psyche, hopefully never having to see again.
Yeah, one of the ones that was thrown around was Street Fighter.
No, God.
Yeah.
Please, God, no. Alright, well, that's going to wrap it up for today. And as we say at the end of every episode, you can fix that in post.